So I'm going to show you a cup and cone bearing. On your old school, old style vehicles, they would use a cup and cone in the front. Nowadays we've moved on and we're onto generation 4 and 5 bearings, where it's what we refer to as solid bearings. So the whole bearing is assembled, you just press it onto the axle and into the knuckle and boom, we're done. And the newer ones you just bolt on. But this is still old school, and there's still a lot of them around. You have one there and one over there. The two cones taper in towards each other. When they strip it, the outer cone comes off quite easy. They tap it out and it comes off, but the inner cone stays on. So the correct way to do it is to use a bearing separator, which you then clamp around the bearing, put it in the press, and you press the bearing off. But what a lot of guys do is they use a punch and they try and knock it off from the side like that. And inevitably what happens is punch will slip and hit this part of the hub that leaves little indentations. So if you push something down here, it's got to come up somewhere else. So it will come up next to it. It will form what you call a high spot. That high spot, you'll push the bearing on, you'll push the new bearing on, no problem. But that high spot is in microns, it's in hundredths of a millimeter. And that high spot then transfers through this part of the bearing onto your running face. And what happens is it forms friction. You have friction build-up between the rollers and the high spot. And then your bearings start breaking down, they start spalling, and those metal fragments go into the grease, and then eventually the bearing fails. It's not the bearing, it's the way it's fitted. So that's your cone. But the other part of your bearing is your cups. So your cups fit inside the knuckle with the taper to the outside. Now what the guys do is you've got to get the cup up and you've got to tap it up. You will have cutaways in this collar over there. Then you take your punch, you clean out all the old grease, because this will be packed full of grease, and you tap the cup up for them. So you tap it out equally. So they work very quickly with the punch and they damage the area where the bearing sits, where the cup sits. You'll have little indents in your knuckle. What you have to do then is you have to take sandpaper and sand that flat. That there's no more high spots. So today we're going to grease a bearing and we're going to fit the bearing into the knuckle with the hub. So first things first, once you strip this, you're going to clean it, but it's got to be clean like you do in heart surgery. These are highly polished surfaces. You have acid and fatty oils on your skin. So as soon as your body acids get onto the metal, even though they're coated in oil, it will start a decay process. Bearing has to run in grease. It can't have any hard spots or anything that's abrasive in it. It's a smooth running area. So if you touch this and you going to now do your bearing and boom, there's a little place where there isn't enough oil and the body acids get onto that running face of the bearing, it could potentially cause the bearing to fail. So today we're going to perform surgery, hence the glove. What people do is they take this bearing and they think it needs grease and they knock the cups in and then they rub the grease over the rollers on the bearing and they think that's enough, but it's actually not. Cup and cone bearings need to be packed. You've got to pack them with grease. What I like to do, and what you should do, is each cup and cone should stay together. So if you're going to grease this cone and you're going to put this cup in the outside, then this bearing must be fitted on that position on the knuckle. I mix your cups in that up. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to take the grease, squish it into your hand. Here's the narrow side of your bearing, there's the wide side of your bearing. Grease from the wider side of your bearing. What you want to do is you want to push the grease in till it comes out the other side of the bearing. Check it out, it's easy. That's what you learn. You've done this.
I've done this.
You've done this.
It's a process.
Now we're going to fit the cups. So we're going to say, okay, this bearing is going to be the outer cup. So we take the packet, squish it out, and this is where it gets fun. The one thing about bearings, because they're so tight fitting, you need to tap around. Because if you just knock it one side, and I've seen it happen, you can break the knuckle. I'm tapping it like a clock. So 12, 3, 6, 9. So you see now you've got it into the knuckle, but it's got to go deeper. And then you just turn it around and check it, run your fingers in to see if there's still a gap there. This is going to be our inner. Again, you've got to wipe it clean. Make sure there's no fluff or anything left behind. Here comes your oil seal. So you've got an outer seal and an inner seal. This will be the outer seal. So it's the same as when you put the bearing. You ideally don't want to knock on the seal because this is thin metal, and if you knock directly on it, you get a warp it and twist it, and then your seal will not seal properly. If it doesn't become apparent immediately, it will later on. What you would do with the remainder of the grease in the packet, you can fill this cavity between the two bearings. Then we move to our trusty press. So you'll see I get it in the center of the press, because if you don't, it will push it skew, and you'll press and eventually something will break. And just go, you've got a lot of pressure, squeeze this up a bit, and release your press, and voila!